Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our EQ2 community conversations. We're so happy to have you join us all here today. As you may know, our goal in these webinars is to share knowledge around best practices, implementation tips and strategies, work with special populations, and just the wide range of creative EQ2 applications that we've been hearing from agencies across the country. Before we get started, I'll briefly introduce myself, this webinar, the EQ2 program, and last but not least, our absolutely stellar guests from the Harris County Juvenile Probation Department who will be sharing the ways that EQ2 has helped them build team cohesion and a sense of family within their juvenile justice residential programs. As I'm talking, please feel free to use the chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to introduce yourself and let us know where you're coming to us from. So please feel free to put that in the chat now. If you don't know me already, I'm Dr. Jess Linick, co-clinical director here at the Lionheart Foundation. On the call with me today behind the scenes is our senior program manager, Jen, and our other co-clinical director, Dr. Beth Kasarjan, as well as many other folks from the Lionheart team. So you might see their names pop up answering questions in the chat. If you do have questions as we go through the webinar, please feel free to use the chat feature. And a big thank you to everyone who submitted questions beforehand. We're really going to try to get to everyone's questions live. And as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and you'll get a link to view it in a couple of days. So super briefly about the Lionheart Foundation and EQ2, we are a nonprofit organization that's been around for over 30 years. If you want to know more about Lionheart as a whole, feel free to check out our website, lionheart.org. The program we'll be discussing today is EQ2. If you're not familiar with EQ2, it's a staff self-regulation and support program, which really at its core is designed to help direct care staff build the essential and often very complex social and emotional regulation skills that they need to do their jobs well. But EQ2 is so much more than that. It is also really meant to be an ongoing support program for staff that gets embedded into agency culture, which is what we're going to hear more about today. We have handbooks for circle-based groups, an online training program for facilitators and supervisors, and a mobile health app for all staff, which you'll get a chance to download at the end of the webinar if you don't already have it. So enough about all of that. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce the team from the Harris County Juvenile Probation Department. If you don't know where that is, that's around Houston in Texas. And can I just say, I'm so excited for all they have to share. It's a real treat to have so many people from one agency come together for something like this. It really underscores their strength as a team and their dedication to this work. So please join me in saying hi to Mr. Payne, the lead TBRI practitioner, Mr. Cooper, TBRI specialist, Mr. Tesano, shift supervisor, Mr. Howell, unit supervisor, and Miss Britton, unit supervisor. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Yay.
Hello.
It's so good to see all your faces.
Hello.
Good to be here.
Awesome. So we'll just jump right in. And before we dive in, though, to the awesome ways you've been using EQ2, I think folks might find it helpful just to know a little bit about the facility you're in and the youth that you serve. So Mr. Payne or Mr. Cooper, take it away. Tell us a little bit about Harris County.
So we work in juvenile probation and we work in the detention facility that's located in downtown Houston. Right now we house about 170 kids. Most of our kids are in there for felonies, a lot of violent crimes. And so, you know, that is a very difficult work environment to sometimes be a part of. Most of our girls are in there for human trafficking. Most of our boys are in there either for aggravated robbery or either murder for that matter.
Okay. Yeah. So a very, as you said, a really intense environment. Yeah. And I would love to learn a little bit more maybe about the evolution of trauma-informed care in Harris County. I think something we've talked about is that you all are really kind of on the forefront, we feel like, of trauma-informed care, given your use of EQ2 and many of the other programs. But Mr. Cooper, I know you've been in the field for almost 20 years or over 20 years at this point. So could you share a little bit about what you've seen in Harris County in terms of the evolution of trauma-informed care?
Sure, Jess. So I started in 2008 as a detention officer, and now I'm a TBRI practitioner. And as a practitioner and an EQ2 facilitator, and a longtime employee of Harris County Juvenile Probation, I've had the opportunity to witness and contribute to a significant cultural shift within our system, one that has moved away from rigid punitive practices and toward a more therapeutic, relational, and developmentally appropriate approach. Historically, our system, like many across the nation, was rooted in control and compliance, with a strong emphasis on punishment and deterrence. The belief was that the swift consequences would correct behavior. And while this model, may have produced short-term compliance, it often failed to really address the underlying needs driving the behavior, particularly for the youth who experience complex developmental trauma. So since the integration of TBRI and EQ2 signaled a pivotal change, one centered on connection over control and healing over punishment, these models recognize that regulation and safety must come before behavior change. We began to focus on co-regulation and relationship building and creating a felt safe environment for youth, especially those who have never experienced that before. With that said, the shift wasn't without resistance. We got a lot of pushback, guys. And the pushback came from a lot of tenured staff who felt we were becoming too permissive. For many, the traditional model was all that they have known, and that's understandable. But when you know better, you do better. When we talked about connection and compassion, some heard leniency. When we emphasized regulation over reaction, a lot of people heard soft. But what changed the narrative and helped turn skepticism into buy-in was credibility. Myself and several of my colleagues brought years of experience from direct care and secure facilities. We've done the work in the trenches. We weren't talking theory. We were applying these principles in real time in high stress environments and seeing great positive results. That credibility mattered. Staff began to listen, not just because of what we were saying, because of our work experience. When they saw that connection didn't necessarily mean lack of accountability, that in fact relational approaches led to sustainable behavior change, they started to lean in, which was great for us as a department. And that's how culture begins to shift. When people feel empowered to try something new when they actually see it working. The shift is ongoing, but what's most encouraging is that we're building a system where kids are seen, heard, and supported, not just managed. We've moved from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And more importantly, how can we help you heal?
Mr. Cooper, mic drop. That was amazing. That was amazing. I think, what stood out to me most, as you said, is that credibility. And you really, one of the questions we got, and I'm not going to jump ahead to it, but is really, how do you build buy-in? Not just at the level of direct care staff, but also at the level of leadership and executive leadership, kind of all the way through the system. And I think you really just answered that question so beautifully, that you really have people that are pushing that forward, who really believe it in their hearts that this is the way to work. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I am going to jump around from our outline. I apologize. Mr. Payne, I'm going to come to you just briefly if you want to touch on, or Mr. Cooper, either of you, briefly on the relationship between EQ2. And you mentioned TBRI. We have a lot of folks perhaps on the call who are either using TBRI or who are kind of wondering if the two work together. And so maybe just briefly sharing, what do you see as the synergy between TBRI and EQ2?
I'll quickly just share. There are a lot of similar terms that they both have. So the language, because that matters. When you're trying to create a culture, people need to understand what's the jargon. And when we talk about being an authoritative caregiver, one who doesn't lack structure versus nurture and vice versa, both of them preach that emphasis on the importance of them both, as well as like understanding where the kids are when it comes to their brain and the deficiencies that they may have, and how does that show up in their behavior, and kind of seeing beyond what we see on surface level when it comes to just that behavior. And at its core, both of them value relationships with the staff and the kids, relationship between staff, and then supervisors and staff as well. So it was easy to transition into adapting EQ2 because of nothing compromised or conflict the fidelity of TBRI at all.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if folks have more questions about TBRI, you have 2/5 many experts on the call around TBRI. So if we could turn to EQ2, and before we're going to get a chance to hear from each of the supervisors individually about the changes that they're seeing. But just generally, since you've adopted EQ2, what general changes have y'all seen in whether that's in the staff, in how they relate to each other, and how they're relating to youth? What have you seen? Maybe Mr. Payne, Mr. Cooper, or anyone that wants to share general changes.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, nice to see you, Mr. Tesano.
See you as well. We have seen a lot of change, especially with EQ2 because it works hand in hand with TBRI. The staff and the supervisors on the floor, when they're dealing with the youth, they normally remember that they're an adult. That's the important thing because the resident can definitely bring the worst out of you. So when dealing with the resident and as well as the staff, they build connection with the staff and the resident, and also they the staff also creates connection with the resident as well. I remember one time it was a resident that was going through a traumatic experience, and it triggered a staff member. It also made her relive some trauma. And because the staff knew their coworkers' trauma, they were able to, tap that staff member out, and also, go counsel with her, kind of give her those tools, those breathe, stop breathing, listen, all those things as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it sounds like staff in general are really able to form the connections with youth and build the relationships with youth that we're really hoping that they will build through TBRI, and also to be there for each other. One of the things I think you all maybe speak about that I've heard you say is they otherwise maybe wouldn't have an opportunity to even talk with each other like this, that just that having EQ2 groups and that they're run in circles gives staff a chance to come together and have these meaningful conversations and feel supported by each other. Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Yeah, just to add on to what Mr. Tesno said, so we started implementing the what went down worksheets from EQ2. And one of the noticeable changes that I'm proud of is the format it gives us to create emotionally intelligent relationships between the staff, right? So honestly speaking, when a staff had a conflict with another staff and they had to identify, what do you think that other staff was feeling? They put, I don't care, right? Because sometimes that happens. But now we know where to start, because you can't build long-lasting empathetic relationships if you're not mindful of how other people feel. We can't have the culture, right, that is symbolic of EQ2 and TBRI if we don't have a culture where we're compassionate about the people that we're working alongside with. And so EQ2 has given us the framework to start the conversation, right? How do we build closer relationships? How do we see each other's needs as important? And then what avenue can we take to meet those needs?
Wow, so many mic drop moments. Thank you, Mr. Payne. I think that, meeting staff where they're at, that we really are offering them language so that we can meet them where they're at, that we know where they are, and that we can really, really build from there. So I think maybe if it feels good to y'all, let's turn to the all-stars of this webinar, the supervisors, and maybe would love to hear for each of you how you've brought EQ2 alive on the floor and coaching staff in real time. That's something that we're starting to talk about more and more, not just with regard to making sure staff have the skills before they hit the floor, but what can you do kind of right in the moment or maybe after something has happened to really make sure that we're reinforcing not just skills, but giving staff the support they need. So I wonder, let's start with Mr. Howell. Maybe can you share a little bit about what you've seen in general since starting EQ2 with the staff that you supervise?
Yeah, with my crew, I've noticed that since we initiated the EQ2 module, that we've been able to like strengthen our internal relationships, recognizing that being supportive with our coworkers, it kind of prevents from even like burnout from our coworkers. Just knowing that someone is here for them or just understands or empathizes with what they be going through, and it's just a early intervention in maintaining and understanding that a healthy environment can go both ways for the kid on kid relationship as well as the staff on staff relationship as well as the staff on kid relationship.
Yeah.
So that's very critical in our line of work. I can recall one time when we had a resident return from court. And at this time, she was being detained. She was had a mindset that she was going home at the time, but her parents, she got detained, and it was coming to find out that her caregiver was unable to take care of it at the time. So after speaking with one of my staff workers, she was also a product of the foster care system. So after listening to the story that she gave her, it kind of re-triggered some kind of emotion that she already had pent up from previous, experiences. With that being said, I noticed that that the staff was getting triggered, and she had to step to the back to the break room to take a break from speaking with the resident. At that time, that's when the staff made me aware of uh, her past experiences with dealing with the foster, and she was able to connect with the kid because she not only spoke with the kid, but she is setting examples physically by saying that not just because that you don't have anyone right now to take care of you, that doesn't limit the success that you will have in life. So the kid was able to understood that, but you can tell that the staff was still kind of hurt from what was going on because it kind of like I said, brought up harboring emotion that she had deep down inside from herself. Uh, with that being said, like after that, I make sure that I contacted the staff after work to check up on her to make sure that she's okay with coming back to work with that trauma being rehashed up for as well as just continuing to check on all our staff doing that type of process. Because like I said, you never know what another person is going through at the time. And just for you to even address or even ask, it kind of, it gives someone hope that if someone cares. And when you know that you see that your coworker cares, is you can able to transfer that as far as working with your youth. And that's the way we've been doing it on our. I feel that just the regular check-ins are critical in EQ2 as far as keeping the team working cohesive.
That's so, Mr. Howell, what you said, I think you hit on so many things. Thank you for sharing that
No
piece
problem.
and that specific story, because what I hear is having EQ2 groups or just having the space to talk to each other makes it easier then to go to each other for support if something happens, right? Like the fact that that staff member was able to be vulnerable with you and say, hey, this is what happened to me. This is why I'm having this reaction. This is maybe the kind of support that I need. Or that you just offered her the support that she needed, checking in with her, making sure that she knew you were there for her. As an aside, we're doing, and you all know this, we're doing a study with Purdue University about the level of staff adversity, staff ACEs that they're coming in with. And the preliminary data that we have is really, really high. Like, we've always known that staff have their own histories of trauma that they're coming in with, but the data is really showing that that's really, really quite striking, maybe more than we even thought. And so I think all the more highlights the need to give staff the support that they need, just in the way that we give trauma-informed care to youth, that we have to also give that to staff. And Mr. Howell, I think you really highlighted how you were able to do that in real time. And also that you built the relationship with that staff member beforehand so that in that moment she could come to you and she felt safe. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that. Mr. Tesano, let's turn to you. Maybe can you share a little bit about what you're seeing in the staff that you supervise with EQ2?
I'm gonna piggyback off of a little bit of what Mr. Howe said. A lot of staff, when we have these groups, we take them away from the residents, and it also gives them like a refresher. It gives them a different light. And some staff mentioned, they they feel like they have to get a lot of things off their chest, and they really, a lot of staff don't go to therapy. So in reality, we see our staff and these residents more than we see our own families. So the point that they give, just the fact that they can let out and kind of release the little things that they have on their chest or in life in general, that's a major key. And it was shocking because when I first had the group, a lot of staff started dropping tears, and I was like, wow, this is really impactful. Um, Staff kind of was, and I kind of, we had to warm up to things, it wasn't just, wow, I'm just gonna tell my business, but fortunately we was able to, get comfortable with everyone, and they actually expressed a lot of things that I would never think about, and and it built a bond, a connection, because not only that is it built trust, because you have to trust someone to tell some people those secrets, you know. But also those secrets also help the job as well. You know, like I said, those triggers. You know, I'm gonna share one thing that we learned from the staff. One staff was sexual assaulted, and we had to you know, assist the resident due to her harming herself, and it, you know, kind of triggered it, because we had to, you know, take some of the objects from her, from, you know, like her clothes, because she can choke herself and things of that nature, because she was placed on special attention to, you know, prevent the incident from actually going through. And the staff, man, she is almost like she relived that whole scene, you know. And like I said, we had to pull her away, talk to her, you know, and you know, get her a drink of water, you know, get her away, you know. And like I said, we use those tools, the stop, breathe, and choose, the remember you're the adult, and all those things as well. But the staff, they really appreciate EQ2, because it definitely works hand in hand with connection, you know, correction, and empowering. Those are the TBR principles as well. But you know, but yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, no, that's really amazing. And it, you know, as you said, really kind of piggybacks off Mr. Howell and what he shared. But, you know, I think what's also unique in what you shared is that you were able to offer that staff support in real time, right? That not only was she able to notice that she's getting triggered, we talk about that a lot in EQ2, is that building that self-awareness muscle to know, oh, I'm getting triggered. I should probably do something now before I get super triggered and completely kind of lose control, right? And so the fact that that staff member was able to say, wow, I'm feeling triggered, I could use some support, that you as her supervisor and other staff members were there to say, hey, yeah, why don't you come, let's go to the break room, let's get you some water. Really that psychological first aid kind of sense of let's make sure that we're taking care of you. But really that trust was built from the beginning, and that EQ2, it sounds like, really helped you build that trust, so that in those moments of really high stress and high acuity, people can support each other in the ways that they need.
Definitely.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing, amazing. I'm holding back my tears. If you know me, you know I'm a crier. So I'm going to try to hold till the end.
And one more thing.
Yeah.
Another thing to piggyback off from Mr. Howell, I heard him say, thank you, Mr. Howell, for giving me some pointers. He also said it. I'm gonna piggyback off on what EQ2 does to help the youth. Yes, it does build connection with residents as well, because they can relate more, because the staff feel more, you know, comfortable with talking to someone that actually dealt with those situations. I always tell my staff and the kids, you can't tell me how cold Canada is unless you've been to Canada. You know, you got to be there to know the severity and the environment, the situation, and the best person to help someone is a person who's already been through it and overcame it. You know, that beat trials and tribulations. You know, you can't let failure fail. You got to let it teach you at the end of the day.
That's so beautiful. We got a question in the chat, and maybe we can, I think, maybe circle back to this later, is kind of what is the overlap between lived experience kind of and EQ2 and building team cohesion? Because I think you're really, you know, we all come into this work with our own stuff. And as I said, a lot of the data now showing high level of adversities, and how do we maybe acknowledge that, transform that, so that we're really showing up in a good way for these relationships, that they're not getting in the way, but that we can use them, you know, that we can say, yeah, like this is, I can own the things I've been through. Yeah, so beautiful. Miss Britton, shall we turn to you? And I think one thing I want to share, you are on the as we call the night tour, or the third shift, correct? So curious to hear more from you about what you're noticing with your staff, and any kind of real-time examples you might want to give.
So when it comes to EQ2, one of the things, working as an overnight supervisor, one of our big challenges overnight, of course, when it comes to staff, is we deal more with fatigue. It's just the staff trying to stay awake. Just that's a task in itself. So when it comes to the staff, anyone knows that once you're fatigued, you get very frustrated. Your patience can be a lot thinner and shorter. So when it comes to dealing with the staff on the overnight and how EQ2 plays with them, we try to get past the fatigue first and foremost. But it's also just that check-in with them to see if they're okay. Initially, when I first started the EQ2, I instantly went straight to TBRI. Okay, this is a trust-based relationship. That is what we're forming with the staff. And it's specifically overnight. We have a lot of staff that work overnight that have been working for the county 20 plus years. We have a lot of our older staff. We have our baby boomers and everything. One thing that you know about a baby boomer is they come to work. So when I start having staff that are missing work or or if I see them a little more fatigued than normal, it gives me an opportunity, and not just me, but also their coworkers, a chance to check in with them. What's going on? Are you okay? One of the things that everyone keeps touching on is the word support. And we don't realize the impact of that word of support, carrying someone, giving them exactly what they need. And with EQ2, we're able to have those groups with the staff. And so that they're not carrying any burden alone. That fatigue burden, that trying to work with these kids, because although we're working overnight and people are like, oh, well, the kids are asleep. No, not all the kids, because a lot of kids have dealt with some type of trauma and they don't sleep at night.
Right.
We do have kids that are up all night, and to see the staff engaging with those kids and not just leaving them to say, oh, okay, well, eventually they'll fall asleep. No, the staff, what I've noticed is they're actually engaging with the kids. Are you okay? Would you like to talk about it? Is there something going on? Are you worried about stress for tomorrow? Because it could be they're going to court the next day. So a lot of them have a lot of anxiety. And the staff can also relate to that, because we do deal with a lot of staff that have anxiety about different things going on in life. And like I said, and again, we all keep saying piggybacking, but also one of the things that Mr. Tesno touched on was that the time we spend with our coworkers. We spend more waking hours with our coworkers than we do with our own children. And in that time that we spend, and all the gentlemen here will let you know, I'm big on team. I am huge on pushing team. But as we work together and we're spending all this time together, why not know the person that you're working with? Why not get to know their triggers? Why not get to know whether or not, if they're you can notice whether or not they're having a good day or a bad day. And once we start noticing these things about each other, we can then start transferring that to figure out what we're noticing about the kids. What is it? Something's different today than it was yesterday. There's something that I'm noticing about this kid in regards to how they're responding. Because one of the things that I like to tell the kids a lot, you're not necessarily mad at me, you're mad at your situation. So let's talk about it. And so with EQ2, it's giving the staff an opportunity to be a lot more empathetic with one another, and that then transfers to them being more empathetic with these kids, where everyone has been through something. And although everyone may not have been through something as traumatic as some of these kids, I've been through something traumatic. Or I have a family member who's been through something traumatic and it affected me as well. So I can still be able to use that and use those experiences to transfer on how I can deal with this kid and be able to assist and help that youth so that we can get a greater outcome. EQ2 is helping us get a greater outcome with the staff so that we can get a greater outcome with these kids and service them the way that they need.
Wow. Wow, Ms. Britton. I think that's everything you said is so, I want to like get the transcript and the recording and like paste it to my wall, because there's so many gems in that, right? How do we really make sure that we're showing up for each other so that we can show up for the kids? And why not? I love that kind of, why not get to know each other? Why not put forth the best team that we can? That's why we're here, you know? Thank you so much for sharing that. Mr. Payne, I want to turn to you. You know, you and I have had a lot of discussions about maybe the broader impact of EQ2 that you see on staff and the kind of broader Harris County community. What do you want to share today here with our audience about that?
Yeah, so what first comes to my mind is we had a staff mention the most traumatic part about his day is figuring out what unit he's going to be assigned to. And I think that that's worthy to pause and just reflect on, because if he's doing that day in and day out, what type of impact is that having on his body? I heard someone say that we're the only mammals that'll stay in a state of stress for years. And so when we talk about EQ2, we're talking about disrupting certain social determinants of health, right? Because a lot of our staff who come to this work because they've experienced some of the things our kids have. And so they have very similar ACEs scores or close to it, adverse childhood experiences. And I've learned that a lot of our staff are sick and they don't know it. They're not aware of it. They don't know the stress that's hyperactivated in their bodies, right? I heard Amanda Purvis say a quote that you won't know how stressed you are until you relieve yourself of it. And so through EQ2, what we're doing is creating an avenue to not only disrupt the social determinants of health, which puts these staff on a trajectory, right, to have chronic illnesses at an early age or potentially have mental health illnesses. And then when they retire, we're all mourning the loss of someone because of the fact that they've been burnt out and they've suffered from compassion fatigue for so long. And so what I love about this is we're doing this so that they can better serve the kids, but also to better serve themselves through creating a support, like Mr. Tesno said, where they have some sense of therapy that they're getting. Because a lot of the staff, even though they have the resources to use employee assistance programs, they may not choose to do so. They may be fearful, maybe stereotypes around it. We talk about where we come from in EQ2, right? And certain toxic teachings that we may have to unlearn. And so through people who have done the work, like Mr. Cooper was mentioning earlier, credible, work with the kids on the floor, maybe even look like them, staff are able to see that this is something that can benefit them. And so when we talk about EQ2, we're talking about finding ways to disrupt the trajectory that not only these kids are on, but staff are on, right? And I think the best place to start for staff is in their own homes. And so I also love about EQ2 is it talks about what is your caregiving style, AKA your parenting style, right? What type of patterns are you perpetuating that you may need to change? And so for a lot of these staff, this is not just a model that they're just doing because it worked. It becomes a way of life. It's a being. And so I'm just passionate about what we have an opportunity to do because we're creating conversations that staff have never had an opportunity to have before.
Wow. I must just want to like pause after that because I think you just named something that is, now I am going to cry.
I'm holding back my tears as well.
Right? But something that is so profound in the lives of the people that not just that we serve, but that we come into contact with, right? And the ways that as we show up for ourselves and show up for each other, we can continue to show up for the world at large, and that we can continue to be here, to really be here, I think is, you really nailed it, Mr. Payne. I can't believe we're already, almost done. We do have a number of questions that have come in through the chat, and so want to kind of give a little time to those. I would like to start with, Carrie put a question in the chat. What are your recommendations for a residential program just starting EQ2 groups? Do you put together groups of staff that work on the same team or shift, or do you work across teams or shift? And I think so maybe might you share a little bit about how you all did it and if you have any recommendations for folks that are just starting.
Yeah, so I'll share our previous facility administrator, Mr. Reams, came up with a brilliant idea to create supervisor trees where you would have shift supervisors provide oversight to unit supervisors who would facilitate the EQ2 groups with their staff. And eventually the other phase would be where even the direct care staff could lead them, and we're working towards that. But right now the focus is to have supervisors in groups. So you have this concentrated approach to how you build rapport with each other, create this safe space, because sometimes the more you widening out, trying to provide this sense of group dynamic amongst everyone, because everybody may not be your safe person. It's just the reality of it, right? And so keeping it like this family-like setting so staff can be able to have at least a go-to person or a go-to set of people, I think makes a world of a difference. And then having that collaborative piece come in to where the shift supervisors are brainstorming initiatives that they can create a culture with amongst all staff and all supervisors is an approach that we found to be very effective.
May I
Beautiful.
also add that another thing is we have the shift supervisors that oversee the unit supervisors. However, some of us unit supervisors actually collab as well. So I've sat in and helped conduct a circle with another unit supervisor to just add to and give that extra support to that supervisor as well as that team. So as unit supervisors, we also come together as well and work together to assist each other in that, in building that staff trust and everything with EQ2.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it sounds like you're really you are in many ways modeling what you're hoping staff will do. Is let's be
Exactly.
there for each other, let's show up for each other. Let me hop over here. I'll co-facilitate this group, and that really you're modeling everyone's on the same team. You know, we are distinct teams, but everyone's on the same team.
And that's called leading by example.
Exactly, leading by example. That is, I think, one of the, if we had to give anybody the biggest EQ2 tips, is really leading by example. We got a question in the chat, and this relates to another question we had around buy-in. If the culture is maybe already negative, or as Leslie put in the chat, maybe trust is being compromised in some way, whether staff are being, you know, overly permissive, or there's contraband issues, or I'm curious if you all navigated that, or how you navigated that, if there were some staff who really weren't buying in to what we were trying to put down. Oh, you're remuted, Mr. Cooper.
I'm sorry. I think it goes back to credibility. Like I said earlier, you know, when we put our team of practitioners who put together for TBRI, it was strategically done. And so we were all handpicked and selected. And like I said, all of us came with credibility because we had done this work before. And so it was easy for staff who already trusted us just based on our previous experiences. You know, it wasn't hard for them to follow what we were doing. And so, of course, yes, it was a little permissive. However, you know, if other staff saw us doing it and, you know, we were leading by example, you know, they were easy for them to follow suit, so to speak.
Awesome. So really coming back to that credibility and just, as you said, leading by example and keeping going. Yeah, amazing. I know we have so many questions. I'm doing my best to kind of juggle between all the questions. I want to come back to one that we touched on initially. And I don't know if anybody has anything more to say about this, but about team dynamics, lived experience, working together with Cohesion. Anything else anybody wants to say more about that question or what you've seen?
Just to add to what Mr. Cooper said, you know, we'll never ask the staff to do something that we aren't willing to do. We have a lot of different supervisors, we have a lot of different facilitators, we all have different backgrounds, but we all have the common goal. And so with that common goal, we come together. We may have different opinions, but at the end of the day, we still come together and try to come together for the common goal. And with that, we're again leading by example, because we will never ask our staff to do anything that we aren't willing to do ourselves, what we aren't willing to step in and assist with, and able to support them as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Walking the walk, as we say. We've got a couple questions coming in about measuring progress or success or results. And I am wondering if y'all have anything you might want to share about, I mean, I think we've seen, and as you've shared, you can feel the changes or the shifts in staff relating to each other and how they're relating to youth. Is there any way that you're measuring or thinking about success of the programs in other ways?
So right now, our focus is kind of focused on the qualitative aspect of it. You know, we have this model, we practice chasing needs and not outcomes in TBRI. And I know as far as like when you talk about budgets and grants, right, and all of the political aspect, you may want to measure the stats. But as we've done this work, we start to realize the outcomes produce themselves. We do have certain trackers that we can go back because we did do that with TBRI and monitor incident reports and staff grievances and mediations. That really hadn't been the vocal point of this conversation because a lot of times when you focus on outcomes too much, you're not really focusing on the needs enough, just in my opinion. But if you need to do that for the sake of trying to get buy-in, then I highly encourage that you do so. But for right now, this is just about showing up for these kids and for these staff in a way that will, as a byproduct, will produce the results that we want to see.
Beautiful. Well said, Mr. Payne. Thank you. Thank you.
Another thing I wanted to piggyback off on is you never know how much a good job or I appreciate you or you're doing better. You know, those words of affirmation, those go a long way, and it makes a lot of the staff and the residents, you know, actually want to make you proud. You know, and look forward to putting a smile on your face, you know, as well as you do them. It's kind of, you know, it goes both hand in hand. But at the end of the day, those words, you know, those kind words, those go a long way. So that's a great measure of progress, you know, telling them good job.
1000%. You know, we talk about an EQ2, seeing the core self, right? And really being seen and acknowledged. And when we offer praise, we're in many ways doing that. We're saying, I see you, you know,
Yeah.
I see you beyond any mask that you're wearing. And I want you to know that the me in here sees the you in you, you know, and that goes so far. I have one final question maybe for all of you as we have a mere 4 minutes, which means that I'm going to try to answer or ask the question so fast. I'm wondering, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about staff and youth, obviously. What has it been like for all of you, maybe in running EQ2 groups or in having EQ2 as a resource? What's it been like for you to maybe be able to give staff some of this support in this way? Anything anybody might want to share? Mr. Payne?
I was like, pick me. Um, compassion satisfaction has increased. You know, we talk about compassion fatigue a lot, but just getting an opportunity, working alongside Mr. Cooper, Mr. Frazier, who's on the call, who've kind of been responsible, kind of initiating this, the fulfillment we get out of bringing a dynamic to juvenile justice that had never been before, right? And so it's just brought a great sense of fulfillment in us to be able to help facilitate a culture and relationships and practices that will transcend to the work, but beyond what we do at work as well.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else want to share anything?
For me, as management, we are required to do management training. So we go through all different types of trainings. But when it comes to EQ2, I feel as if it gives us another tool to add to that toolbox in order how we process with the staff, how we work with staff. And it's giving us a better understanding with staff because we can't put everyone in a box. Some people you have to deal with in different ways. You have to approach in different ways. I can get the same quality of work with someone, but it's all in how I approach them. And now that I'm learning the staff more and they're learning each other more, it's giving me another way to be able to process and be able to approach certain staff. Like I said, it's just adding that extra tool in the toolbox to help us with dealing with staff and anything that may arise.
Amazing. Amazing. I love that. Really that principle of just getting to know you, you know? There's a song, right? Getting to know you, right?
Mr. Cooper's favorite.
Is it? See, it was in the resonance of the webinar. Well, I think we are just about at time. So I really want to thank you all so deeply for sharing the work that you do every day, for being here, for sharing this with, there are so many folks on this call and many folks from DJJ settings around the country who are really thinking about what you're doing and hoping, I think, to replicate what you're doing. So our panelists, if you want to put any contact information in the chat, please feel free to do so. In a moment, Jan is going to share a little screen that has, if folks are not familiar with EQ2 or you want to check out the app or the facilitator training, feel free to scan these QR codes or go to lionheart.org. And if you have any questions, you can always email us, eq2@lionheart.org. Oh, Darius, I think we sent it to hosts and panelists. I'm going to put your email. Oh, okay. Mr. Cooper sent it to everyone. Darius, if you want to resend your email, but just click everyone, not hosts and panelists. But we really could not thank you enough. And again, if folks have other questions, we are here for you. And we'll hang out here just for a couple more moments, and then we'll close out the webinar. But thank you, thank you, thank you. And sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions. It's always a mission.
Thank you for the opportunity, Jess.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. There's Darius's email in the chat. And don't worry if you need to get a hold of somebody, just email us and we'll send it to the folks that can answer the questions better than we can. I hope everybody has an absolutely amazing day, that you breathe after the webinar. We did it, you did it. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.